My name is Carol. I am 68 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have believed that family is the most important thing in life. I always thought my home was a safe place, filled with love and happy memories, birthday parties, holiday dinners, and quiet evenings with my son, Michael, when he was little. But one afternoon, everything changed right in my own living room. The day started like any other. I was setting the table, and the sound of plates and silverware filled the air. There was some laughter, but I could feel something was not right. The room felt tense, and I noticed my daughter-in-law, Sarah, giving me a look when I offered her more food. Michael, my son, didn't seem to notice anything. You never think the people you love most will hurt you until it happens. I remember it so clearly. Voices got louder, a small argument turned big, and then, out of nowhere, Sarah pushed me. It was not just the push that hurt, but the way Michael stood there and did nothing. He just looked away, not saying a word. In that moment, my heart broke. I knew I had to stand up for myself. That is when I made the hardest choice in my life. I canceled their wedding gift, the house I had worked so hard to save for, the house I wanted them to start their life in. Have you ever felt like you don't matter in your own home? Please share your story below. And if you believe in standing up for yourself, please like and subscribe. It will help me a lot in this phase. Your support means so much to me. When I look back on my life, I see so many moments that were shaped by love and hard work. After my husband passed away, it was just Michael and me. He was still so small, and I remember those long nights rocking him to sleep, singing softly until his little eyes finally closed. There were nights when I was so tired I could hardly keep my own eyes open, but I never let Michael see me cry. I wanted him to feel safe, to know that his mother would always be there. Money was tight, so I worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses during the day and working at the grocery store in the evenings. Sometimes I would come home so late, my feet aching, but seeing Michael's smile made every long day worth it. I tried to make every birthday special, even when we didn't have much. I would bake him a cake from scratch, decorate the kitchen with homemade streamers, and wrap his presents in newspaper when I couldn't afford fancy paper. His laughter on those days was the best gift I could ever get. I remember the pride I felt watching him grow up, seeing him walk across the stage at his high school graduation. I clapped so hard my hands hurt, tears running down my face because I knew how much we had both given up to get to that moment. When Michael brought Sarah home for the first time, I was nervous but hopeful. I wanted so much for him to be happy, and I hoped Sarah would be the daughter I never had. I cooked her favorite meals, asked her about her family, and made sure she felt welcome at every holiday. I even gave her the recipe for my mother's famous chicken pot pie, something I had never shared with anyone outside the family. We took photos together, laughed over silly board games, and I tried to include her in every family tradition. At first, things seemed good, but slowly I started to notice small changes. Sarah would sometimes look at me with a coldness I didn't understand, or she would make little jokes that felt like they were at my expense. I try not to let it bother me, but every little thing seemed to hurt more than I wanted to admit. Michael, who used to call me every day just to check in or share a funny story, started calling less and less. At first, I told myself he was just busy, that life was getting hectic for him and Sarah, but deep down, I missed hearing his voice and knowing I was still a part of his world. When we were all together, I would offer advice or try to help, hoping to be useful or just to join in the conversation, but Sarah would brush off my suggestions as if they didn't matter, and Michael would go along with her, barely looking my way. It felt like my words floated in the air, never landing anywhere, never really heard. I started to notice that during family dinners, I would sit quietly, listening to them talk about plans I hadn't heard of, vacations they wanted to take, or friends they were going to visit. If I tried to add something, Sarah would change the subject or talk over me, making it clear she wasn't interested in what I had to say. There were moments when I felt completely invisible, just another piece of furniture in the room, present but unnoticed. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that things would get better if I was patient, but the feeling of being left out grew stronger with each passing week. I missed the days when Michael would come to me for advice, or just sit beside me on the couch and talk about his worries or dreams. Now, it seemed like Sarah was the center of his world, and I was just someone in the background, only needed when it was convenient. It started with the small things, my suggestions brushed aside, my presence barely acknowledged, and a quiet sadness settling in my heart that I couldn't shake. I wanted so much to keep our family close, to hold on to the warmth and togetherness we once had, but it felt like the harder I tried, the further away they drifted. It wasn't just my imagination. The mood in our home truly began to change. Family dinners, which used to be filled with easy laughter and warm conversation, started to feel uncomfortable, like I was walking on eggshells. I would try to share a story from my day, or a memory from when Michael was young, hoping to spark a smile or a laugh, but Sarah would roll her eyes or sigh loudly, making it clear she wasn't interested or thought my stories were silly. Sometimes, she would cut me off in the middle of a sentence, changing the subject or talking over me as if my words were just background noise. I remember one evening in particular when I accidentally mixed up her coffee order. She laughed out loud, right in front of Michael, and made a joke about old age that stung more than I wanted to admit. Michael didn't say anything to defend me. He just looked down at his plate, letting the moment pass, and I felt a sharp ache in my chest that lingered long after dinner was over. As the weeks went by, I began to feel more and more alone, even when the house was full of people. I would hear laughter from the other room, but it felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's family. I found myself spending more time in my own room, reading or just staring out the window, trying to remember what it felt like to be needed and loved. Even small things like setting the table or folding laundry felt empty without a thank you or a smile. Sometimes, I would catch Michael glancing my way, and for a split second, I would see a hint of the old warmth in his eyes, but it would quickly fade as he turned back to Sarah. I started to wonder if I was the problem, if I had done something to push them away, or if maybe I just didn't fit into their lives anymore. The house, once filled with the sounds of family, now felt cold and unfamiliar, and I felt like a stranger in my own home, holding on to memories that seemed to slip further away each day. I started to feel like a guest in my own home. Michael, who used to come to me with every little worry, now seemed distant. He avoided my eyes during conversations, and when disagreements came up, he always sided with Sarah, no matter how small the issue. It was as if I had become invisible, my feelings brushed aside without a second thought. The house that once felt so full of love now felt cold and unfamiliar. Still, I tried to hold on to hope. There were small moments that kept me going. A rare thank you from Sarah when I made her favorite dessert, or the brief flash of Michael's old smile when he remembered a childhood joke. Those little sparks of kindness made me believe, even for a moment, that things could get better. I clung to those memories, hoping that the family I loved would come back to me, and that the warmth we once shared could return. It was one of those gray, rainy Saturdays when the world outside felt heavy and the air inside seemed even heavier. The rain tapped against the windows, filling the house with a steady sound that only made the silence between us feel thicker. I was in the kitchen, wiping my hands on a towel, trying to keep busy and ignore the tension that had been building for weeks. Michael sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, while Sarah paced around, arms crossed, her face tight with frustration. We were all trapped together in the house, and it felt like there was nowhere to hide from the storm brewing inside. I tried to keep things normal, offering to make lunch and hoping a warm meal might help. "How about grilled cheese and tomato soup?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful, but Sarah barely looked up and muttered, "Whatever." Michael didn't say a word. I tried not to let it hurt, but it did. I moved quietly around the kitchen, making the soup just the way Michael liked it when he was a boy, hoping the familiar smell would bring back better memories. As I set the table, I noticed the little crystal vase my mother had given me was missing. "Has anyone seen the vase that was here?" I asked gently. Sarah rolled her eyes and said, "Does it really matter? It's just a silly old vase." Her words stung, but I tried to brush it off. "It was special to me," I said softly. Michael didn't even look up from his phone. Maybe it got moved. "I don't know, Mom." I felt a lump in my throat, but finished setting the table. We sat down to eat, the sound of rain mixing with the clink of spoons. I tried to tell a story from when Michael was little, but Sarah interrupted almost right away. "Can we not do this right now? I'm tired of hearing the same old stories." Her words were sharp, and I felt my cheeks flush. Michael just kept eating, eyes on his soup. I looked at him, hoping for a smile or a kind word, but he just sat there, silent. After lunch, I went to tidy up the living room and found one of Sarah's magazines on the floor. As I bent down to pick it up, Sarah came in, her footsteps quick and loud. "Why are you always touching my things?" she snapped. I stood up slowly and handed her the magazine. "I was just picking up. I didn't mean anything by it." She snatched it from my hand, her eyes cold and sharp, making me feel like I had done something terribly wrong just by trying to tidy up. "You always have to be in control, don't you? You can't just let us live our lives." My heart started beating faster, a tightness growing in my chest. "I'm just trying to help," I said, my voice shaking a little, wishing she could see that all I wanted was for us to get along. That's when it really started. Sarah's words grew sharper, her voice rising with every sentence, each one cutting deeper than the last. "You're always in a way. This is supposed to be our house now, not yours. Why can't you just let go?" I tried to stay calm, but my hands were trembling, and I could feel the tears threatening to spill over. "I'm sorry if I've made you feel that way. I only want what's best for both of you." She laughed, but it was a harsh, cold sound that made my stomach twist. "You think you know what's best for us? You don't even know when to leave us alone. Maybe you should just go back to your own place and let us have some peace for once." The words hit me like a slap, and I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I blinked them away, not wanting to let her see how much she had hurt me. "This is my home too," I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath. "I've worked so hard for this family. I just want us to get along." Sarah stepped even closer, her face just inches from mine, her eyes full of anger. "You're always playing the victim. Maybe if you stopped meddling, things would be better." My body tensed, my heart pounded in my chest so hard I thought it might burst. I looked over at Michael, who had come to the doorway, watching us. I waited for him to say something, to step in, to defend me, but he just stood there, his face unreadable, not moving, not speaking. Then all at once it happened. Sarah shoved me, her hands pushing against my shoulders. It wasn't a hard push, but it was enough to make me stumble back, enough to leave me stunned and breathless. My heart was racing, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the back of a chair to steady myself. For a moment, the whole world seemed to go quiet, except for the rain beating against the windows and the sound of my own breathing, loud in my ears. I looked at Sarah, her face twisted with anger, and then at Michael, hoping, praying that he would come to my defense, that he would finally say something, but all I saw was silence and distance between us. I stood there, frozen, feeling the air between us grow colder with every second. Sarah didn't back away. If anything, she seemed to grow bolder, her voice echoing in the room. See? This is exactly what I mean. You always make everything about you. You always have to be the center of attention, and you can't stand it when things are in your way. I tried to steady my breathing, but my chest felt tight and my eyes burned. I never wanted to be in the way, I said softly, my words barely more than a whisper. I just wanted to help, to be a part of your lives. Sarah scoffed, shaking her head. Well, maybe it's time you realized that we don't need your help. We're adults now. We want to make our own choices without you hovering over us. Each word felt like another shove, pushing me further away from the family I had worked so hard to hold together. I looked at Michael again, searching his face for any sign of support, any sign that he remembered all the times I had been there for him, but he just stood there, arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the floor. My hands were still gripping the chair, knuckles white, as I tried to keep from falling apart right there in front of them. The rain outside seemed to grow louder, matching the storm inside me. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, my whole body tense with hurt and disbelief. I'm not trying to control anything, I said, my voice cracking. I just want to feel like I still belong here, like I still matter. Sarah rolled her eyes, her lips curling into a cold smile. You had your time, Carol. Now it's our turn. Maybe you should just let us live our lives and stop making everything so difficult. The words echoed in my mind, each one making me feel smaller and more invisible. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to remind them of all the love and care I had given, but the words caught in my throat. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks, hot and silent, as I realized that nothing I said would change their minds. The space between us felt like a canyon, wide and impossible to cross. Sarah finally turned and stormed out of the room, her footsteps loud and angry on the floor. Michael lingered in the doorway for a moment, his face still blank, before he too walked away, leaving me standing there alone. I sank into the nearest chair, my body shaking, my mind spinning with everything that had just happened. I thought about all the years I had spent building this home, filling it with love and memories, only to feel like a stranger in it now. The rain kept falling, the house growing darker as the afternoon slipped away. I sat there for a long time, listening to the storm, feeling the weight of their words and the ache in my chest. I wondered how things had come to this, how I had become so unwanted in the place I had once called my own. I realized in that moment that no matter how hard I tried, I could not make people see my worth if they refused to look. The silence in the house was heavy, pressing down on me, and I knew that something inside me had changed forever. But Michael just stood there, his eyes downcast, his mouth pressed into a thin line. He didn't say a word. He didn't move. He just let it happen. That silence hurt more than the push ever could. I felt something inside me break, a deep, aching pain that went all the way to my bones. I had spent my whole life loving Michael, caring for him, putting his needs above my own. I had welcomed Sarah into our family, tried to make her feel at home, tried to be the best mother-in-law I could be. I cooked her favorite meals, invited her to join our family traditions, and even shared stories from my own life, hoping she would feel like she belonged. I wanted so much for us to be close, for Michael and Sarah to feel supported and loved. But now, in the moment when I needed him most, my own son couldn't even look me in the eye. I stood there for a long moment, frozen, my mind racing with memories of all the times I had comforted Michael when he was hurt, all the times I had stood up for him when no one else would. I remembered the nights I stayed up late sewing costumes for his school plays, the mornings I woke up early to make his favorite pancakes, the years I spent working extra shifts so he could have the things he wanted. I thought about how proud I had been when he brought Sarah home, how much I had hoped we could all be a happy family. But now, all I felt was empty. Sarah turned away, muttering something under her breath as she stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Michael stayed where he was, staring at the floor, his face pale and closed off. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him why he didn't do anything, but the words wouldn't come. My throat felt tight, my hands still shaking, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. I felt so small, so alone, like I didn't even exist in my own home. Eventually, I walked slowly to my bedroom, closing the door behind me as quietly as I could, not wanting to draw any more attention to myself. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I could still feel the pressure of Sarah's hands on my shoulders, the sting of her words, the weight of Michael's silence pressing down on me. I thought about calling a friend, but I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone that your own family has turned against you? That your son, the child you raised and loved, stood by and let someone hurt you? I cried quietly, not wanting anyone to hear, the tears soaking into my pillow as I tried to muffle my sobs. I felt like I was grieving, not just for the loss of respect, but for the loss of the family I thought I had. I wondered what I had done wrong, if I had pushed too hard, loved too much, tried too hard to hold everyone together. I replayed the argument over and over in my mind, searching for a way I could have stopped it, but I kept coming back to the same moment. Michael's silence. That was what hurt the most. Not the argument, not the push, but the fact that the person I loved most in the world did nothing to protect me. The rain kept falling outside, the house growing darker as the afternoon faded into evening. I sat there for a long time, listening to the sound of the storm, feeling the ache in my chest. I knew things could never go back to the way they were. Something had changed forever. I realized then that I couldn't keep letting myself be treated this way. I couldn't keep hoping things would get better if I just tried harder, loved more, gave more of myself. I had to find a way to stand up for myself, to protect my own heart, even if it meant making the hardest decision of my life. That rainy Saturday, trapped inside with the people I loved most, I learned that sometimes the deepest pain comes not from what is done to us, but from what is not done for us. I learned that silence can be just as loud as words, and that sometimes the only person who can stand up for you is yourself. I closed the door to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling as I tried to catch my breath. The silence in the house felt louder than any argument, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. Tears streamed down my face, hot and endless, and I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to block out the memory of what had just happened. I kept replaying the moment over and over. The sharpness in Sarah's voice, the shock of her hands pushing me, and, worst of all, the way Michael just stood there, silent and unmoving. I wondered how my own child could let this happen, how the boy I had loved and raised could watch me be hurt and do nothing to stop it. My heart ached in a way I had never felt before, a deep pain that seemed to reach all the way to my bones. I thought about all the years I had spent caring for Michael, every sacrifice I had made, every night I stayed up with him when he was sick, every birthday cake I baked from scratch, every time I put his happiness before my own. Was I ever truly valued, or was I just convenient until I wasn't needed anymore? The questions swirled in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. I wondered if I had given too much, if I had loved too hard, if I had made it too easy for them to take me for granted. I looked around my room, at the family photos on the dresser and the old quilt on my bed, and felt a wave of loneliness wash over me. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty. The rooms that used to echo with voices and happy memories now felt hollow, as if all the life had been sucked out. Even the simple things, like the ticking of the clock or the creak of the floorboards, seemed to remind me of how alone I was. I wrapped my arms around myself and sat there in the quiet, letting the sadness wash over me, knowing that this was a pain I would not soon forget. Every sound seemed to echo, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of the refrigerator. Even the hallway outside my door, usually busy with footsteps and voices, was now silent, a long stretch of emptiness that made me feel even more alone. I listened to the rain tapping against the window, wishing it could wash away the hurt and confusion inside me. I wrapped my arms around myself and rocked gently, searching for comfort in the rhythm, but the ache in my chest would not go away. I kept thinking about the little things, how Michael used to run to me for hugs, how he once promised I would always be a part of his life, how I had dreamed of growing old surrounded by family who loved and respected me. Now, all of that felt like a story I had told myself, a dream that had slipped away when I wasn't looking. I wondered if things could ever go back to how they were, or if this moment had changed everything forever. The loneliness in that room was so thick I could almost touch it, and as I sat there in the quiet, I realized just how much I had lost. Not just respect, but the sense of belonging I had always cherished. The house, my home, felt like a stranger's place, and I felt smaller and more invisible than I ever had before. That night, as the rain kept falling and the house stayed quiet, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the pain and sadness settle deep in my chest. But somewhere inside all that hurt, something else started to grow, a small, steady feeling that I could not ignore any longer. I realized I could not keep letting myself be treated like an afterthought, not by Sarah, and not even by Michael. I had given so much of myself for years, always putting them first, always hoping things would get better if I just tried a little harder. But now I saw that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough for people who didn't respect me. I sat up in bed and wiped my tears away, feeling a new kind of strength fill me. I was tired of feeling invisible in my own home. I told myself that I deserved better, that I was more than just someone to be used and ignored. I got out of bed and walked over to my desk, where I kept all my important papers. My hands were steady for the first time in days as I pulled out the folder with the house documents. I looked at the papers, thinking about all the years I had worked and saved to give Michael and Sarah a good start, to give them a home filled with love. But now I knew I could not let them have something so important when they could not even show me basic kindness. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer's number, my voice calm and firm when he answered. "I want to cancel the transfer of the house," I said, not letting my voice shake. Effective immediately. He asked if I was sure, and I told him yes, I was sure. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. I was no longer just Michael's mom or Sarah's scapegoat. I was Carol, a woman who deserved respect. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as I made that call, as if I had finally taken back a part of myself that I had lost. I knew it would not be easy, and I knew there would be more hard days ahead, but I also knew I could not keep living in a way that made me feel small and unwanted. That night, I promised myself that I would start putting my own needs first, that I would stand up for myself even if it meant standing alone. I went back to bed and pulled the covers up around me, feeling a little stronger, a little braver, and a little more like the person I used to be before I let other people decide my worth. As I closed my eyes, I told myself that I was not just someone's mother or mother-in-law. I was Carol, and I deserved to be treated with respect and kindness no matter what. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. My decision was made, and I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I called Michael and Sarah into the kitchen, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. They came in, both looking a little confused, maybe even a bit annoyed, as if this was just another small problem I was about to bring up. I stood by the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared so many meals, and looked them both in the eye. I took a deep breath and told them, as calmly as I could, that I had decided to cancel the transfer of the house. "I will not reward cruelty with kindness," I said, my voice unwavering. "The house is no longer yours." For a moment, there was silence, the kind that fills a room and makes it hard to breathe. Then Sarah exploded, her voice rising with disbelief and anger. "You can't do that. We've been planning everything around this house. How could you be so selfish?" she shouted, her hands waving in the air. Michael's face went pale, and he looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Mom, please, you don't mean this. We're family. You always said family comes first. Don't let one bad day ruin everything we've built together." He tried to remind me of all the things I had done for him, tried to make me feel guilty for finally standing up for myself. But I stood my ground, even though my heart ached and my hands trembled behind my back. I told them that I had given everything I could, that I had always put their needs before my own, but I could not keep giving when all I got in return was disrespect and pain. Sarah kept arguing, her words sharp and bitter, but I didn't let them touch me. Michael's voice softened, turning from anger to sadness, but I stayed firm. I watched as their faces changed from anger to shock and finally to a kind of grudging respect. For once, I didn't back down. I stood there, feeling both strong and sad, knowing that this was the right thing to do, even if it hurt. I told them that I hoped, someday, they would understand why I had to make this choice, but I could not let myself be treated like I didn't matter. As they left the kitchen, their footsteps heavy and their voices low, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I had finally stood up for myself, and even though my heart was aching, I knew I had done what I needed to do. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly seen, not just as someone's mother or mother-in-law, but as Carol, a woman who deserved respect. When the time finally came to leave the house, I walked slowly from room to room, letting my fingers brush over the family photos on the walls and the old quilt on the back of the couch. Every corner of the house held a memory. A birthday party with balloons and laughter, a quiet evening reading stories to Michael, the smell of cookies baking in the kitchen on a cold winter day. I paused by the window where I used to watch for Michael coming home from school, and I whispered a soft goodbye to the little boy he once was and the mother I used to be. In the living room, I looked at the spot where we had all gathered for Christmas mornings, the tree bright with lights and hope, and I let myself feel both the happiness and the sadness that came with those memories. I touched the frame of a picture of my husband, remembering his steady voice and the way he always made me feel safe. I stood in the hallway, listening to the quiet, and realized how much I had changed. The house felt different now, not just because it was empty, but because I was ready to let go. I took one last walk through the garden, picking a single flower to take with me, and I closed the door behind me, feeling a mix of sorrow and relief. Moving into my new apartment was scary at first. The rooms were smaller and the walls were bare, but I decided to fill the space with things that brought me joy. I bought fresh flowers every week, placing them in a vase on the kitchen table so their color could brighten my mornings. I unpacked my favorite books, stacking them on the shelves and promising myself I would finally read the stories I had always put off. I hung up photos of happier times, Michael as a baby, family picnics in the park, my husband smiling at me on our wedding day. These pictures reminded me that I had lived a life full of love, even if things had changed. I started to find peace in the quiet. I let myself sleep in when I needed rest, and I made simple meals just for myself, learning to enjoy my own company. I began to explore my neighborhood, taking slow walks in the morning when the world was still waking up. I noticed the way the sunlight came through the trees, the sound of birds singing, and the friendly greetings from neighbors I had never met before. I joined a community group at the local center, where I met other women who had their own stories of change and starting over. We shared cups of tea and stories about our families, and I found comfort in knowing I was not alone. I signed up for a painting class, even though I had never painted before, and I laughed at my first crooked flowers and shaky lines. It felt good to try something new, to let myself be a beginner again. I started baking again, not because anyone expected it, but because it made me happy. I brought cookies to my neighbors and shared recipes with new friends, and I felt a sense of belonging growing inside me. I wrote letters to my grandchildren, telling them stories from my own childhood, and I sent them small gifts, hoping they would know how much I loved them, even if we were apart. I learned to enjoy the small routines of my new life, the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, the feel of a warm blanket in the evening, the simple pleasure of sitting by the window with a good book and a gentle breeze. Each day, I felt a little stronger, a little more like myself. I realized that I did not need a big house or a busy family to be happy. I needed kindness, respect, and the courage to put myself first. I learned that sometimes loving yourself means letting go, even of family. It is not easy to say goodbye to the people and the life you thought you would always have, but sometimes it is the only way to find peace. I am not just someone's mother or someone's mother-in-law. I am Carol. I am a woman who has lived, loved, lost, and found herself again. I am enough, just as I am. I hope that anyone who hears my story knows that they are enough too, and that it is never too late to start again, to find happiness, and to remember that you deserve to be treated with love and respect, no matter what. If you have ever had to choose self-respect over family, I want you to know that you are not alone. Life sometimes brings us to crossroads where we must decide between holding on to relationships that bring us pain and stepping forward to protect our own hearts. Maybe you have found yourself in a moment where you had to stand up for yourself, even when it meant disappointing the people you love most. Maybe you have felt the sting of being misunderstood, or the ache of watching family drift away because you finally drew a line and said, "Enough." If you have ever felt invisible in your own home, or if you have ever been made to feel small by those who should have lifted you up, I invite you to share your story below. Your words matter here. This is a place for honesty, for healing, and for community. When we share our stories, we remind each other that we are not alone in our struggles. Every comment, every memory, every bit of advice you offer could be the support someone else needs to keep going. Let's build each other up, not tear each other down. No one should feel alone in their pain, and sometimes just knowing that someone else understands can make all the difference. If you are reading this and you have never had to make such a hard choice, but you know someone who has, please offer them your kindness and understanding. We are all walking our own paths, and a little compassion can go a long way. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support means more than you know, not just to me, but to everyone who finds comfort and hope in these words. By subscribing, you become part of a community that values strength, hope, and healing. Together, we can create a space where no one feels left out or unloved, no matter what they have been through. Each like, each share, each new subscriber helps us reach more people who might need a reminder that they, too, are enough. Let's promise to support each other, to listen without judgment, and to celebrate every step towards self-respect and peace. Your story, your voice, and your presence here matter. Thank you for being part of this journey. Let's keep moving forward, together, and show the world that even when life is hard, we can find hope and healing in each other.